Welcome dear students. In this video I want to talk to you about progressive web apps. I will talk about what are PWAs, what is the web app manifest, a bit about service workers and the cache API, and of course how to add progressive web apps to your Vue CLI or to transform your Vue.js project into a progressive web app. Now, what are progressive web apps? Progressive web apps are actually a term coined by Google because they want to push web technologies. And progressive web apps are basically just a number of technologies and design patterns that combine what you can do on the web with what you can do with native apps. I've added a link to the Google Web.dev documentation where they also talk about what progressive web apps are, what a good progressive web app makes, and also why you should probably build one. Because a web page is very easy to share, doesn't have to be installed, and the native app has other benefits like being very fast and being able to retain the user by sending push notifications and things like that. So I urge you to read this. Then I will just quickly go over these slides. You can read them yourselves. There are base requirements for a progressive web app, which is your site has to be served over HTTPS. You need a manifest file, and you have to have a service worker in place that does something. It can cache files, it can listen for push notifications, it can do all sorts of things, but at the very least you have to have a service worker. Now, what benefits do you get by progressive web apps? There should also be a slide. Because when you have a progressive web app and you have a set of requirements in place, your app will be installable on devices. So you can add your web application to the home screen and the user can always enter your web page or your web application via this button on the home screen. You can send push notifications, and yeah, you are just more in your user's mind, if so to speak. And at the same time, progressive web applications are still web pages which you can easily share. Now, benefits granted to progressive web apps. Yeah, add the home screen banners, add the home screen shortcuts. That's very interesting. And also, when you have a progressive web app and you open it via the home screen, you will get a window that doesn't resemble a browser. So there won't be an address bar, it will just be your application. And there might be further benefits in the future, like your app being displayed in search engines and things like that. If you want to have a look at a few examples, you can visit AppScope. You should do this on your phone because otherwise you won't get to have the full PWA experience. Also, AppScope itself is a progressive web app, which means it is installable. So when you open AppScope, it will ask you if it should be installed. This can also be done on desktop. Now, when you install apps in Chrome, you have to go to, so I've already installed it, I think. And then you should be able to go to apps, and then there is your AppScope application. Now, this will also be application in your file system, which you can link or add to your dock or double click. And when you open it, you will have an actual application, which is just a web page, but yeah, it's in its own window, it has its icon, it's in the dock, so it is an actual application, which is nice. Now, let's go back to the slides. There are a few examples that you can look at. There are also examples from different operating systems where you see how the add to home screen button might look like on different devices. So there's an older Pokédex with Firefox on mobile where the add to home screen looks like this. Also, you can add custom splash screens when the application opens. Here's an example from Samsung, I think. Here's the same example from Samsung, or from Samsung tablet, where you have your application as its own separate window. It doesn't resemble a browser anymore, so you can add it to the home screen, you can open the shop, and then you have the shop as its own window. And there are a few more examples. Google Drive is now a progressive web app. YouTube TV is a progressive web app, which then looks like this. Has a dark mode and a light mode even. Yeah, there's Twitter, which is also available as a progressive web app. Of course, there's various Pokédexes. And here you see a Linux example. And yeah, lots of further applications. Even Spotify is available as a progressive web app, which you can install. Yeah. And you might also be listed in stores. Now, I will skip these slides. You can have a look at them. It's still difficult to add the home screen on iOS. So you can't use the same code for push notifications for iOS as for all of the other devices. Possibly that may change in the future, but it's possible to add web pages to the home screen and then have them open as applications, as you can see here on an iPad. Yeah, and as of now, all of the browsers support the service worker, so the service worker, who can do jobs in the background of a web page and will start to run even if you close your web page, is now available in all browsers. So the baseline for having progressive web apps is there. So maybe at some point Safari and iOS will support all of the other features. Now, yeah, there is a guy who gathers all of the current information about PWAs. You should check out his blog article to know where we stand right now. Now, to get to the more technical stuff, let's talk about the web app manifest first. There is a great example application by MDN, which you can have a look at. It's called JS13K Games. It looks like this. There's been a competition to write a JavaScript game in under 17 kilobytes or in under 13 kilobytes. And this is a static page that can benefit from being a progressive web application, because we can cache all of this data offline and make it available offline, and it also has some dummy notifications if you want to play around with this. Now, that was the repository. What is a manifest file? A manifest file is just a JSON file that gives the device that's running your web app a bit of information on how it should display this page as a progressive web app. You can set the start URL, you can set colors, you can set the splash screen, and of course you can set all of the icons that you need. In Chrome, there's the possibility to debug all of this. When you go to the application tab, you can see the manifest. So the manifest for this page is, it has a name, it has a short name, it has a theme color. This changes the top header bar on your device, for example, and a lot of icons. Yeah, you might add further data, but icons are the most important. Now, this can be installed or add to home screen. Looks differently on different devices. And when it's on the home screen, it has a red splash screen, which is also defined in the manifest here. Now, here you can see the plus, which means I can install it. Nice. Now, this gives me the benefit of being on the home screen of a user. There are various variables or fields that you can set in the manifest, but let's not go too much into detail about this. Now, the service worker and the cache. The service worker is just a script that runs in the background of your browser. It's separate from your app, and with this you can add features like push notification, background sync, and caching, because it can run even if your browser is not active. There are a few technical prerequisites, like it has to be on HTTPS for security reasons, and you don't have access to all of the DOM APIs. Now, service worker has a specific life cycle, so in the beginning it's installed and activated, and then it just waits for stuff to happen. And how this looks is, if you want to add a service worker, you have to register it in your application. In the example application, it looks like this. There's just an index.html and app.js file, and the app.js first tests if service worker is available in this browser, and then it registers a service worker, which is usually in a SW.js file or something like that. We can check this in the application. When I reload it, you can see here in service worker that the service worker has been activated and it is running. Now, this can be also used as a promise if you want, so you can do stuff as soon as the service worker has actually been registered. Now, in the service worker, you can do various things. In our example service worker, we just care about caching the page, and for this we create a cache name so we can invalidate the cache. And then there's just a static list of the files that have to be cached. One of the first steps in the lifecycle is to install the service worker. In this case, it's just installed, and then it waits for the cache to be available, and then it adds stuff to the cache. You can have a look at the API in detail later on, of course. Now, what our service worker will do once it runs is it will cache certain files, and I can show you this in a minute. And once all of the files are in the cache, each time the browser fetches files from the server, the request first goes through the service worker, which is the event listener that's been added here. So whenever the user fetches something from the server, the service worker first looks into the cache if it's available in the cache. This is what's happening here. Caches match request. If there is a match, return the stuff from the cache. If not, get the stuff from the server and put it in the cache. And as soon as the service worker is activated, we can see if our cache is up to date, or if we have deployed a new version of the app, and redo all of this. You should totally have a look at this code in detail to understand what's happening. So this is the file, it's not that very long, and these are all the files that should be cached. So these are basically all of the static files that are needed for the application, like the index.html and the images and all of this. And to test if this is working, you can go into the browser again, and in the application tab there's the cache storage. And in the cache storage you can see that all of these files have been cached. And now if I, for example, go offline and reload the page, everything is still available because it's in the cache. If I clear the cache and try to reload, you can see that I'm offline. So the service worker is working. Great. Now, how can you add this to your Vue.js application? If you remember the first or the second lecture that we had, everything in the Vue CLI is now plugins, and luckily for us there's a plugin for PWAs. So all we have to do is type Vue add PWA in the CLI, and it will add everything that you need for a PWA. So I have already prepared this, so you don't have to. If you execute this command, the Vue CLI will add a few files to your application. It will also change a few files, and it will add a service worker that uses the Google Workbox plugin, which is then also added to your dependencies. But actually it's hidden under the CLI plugin PWA. And it will also give you robots.txt. It will give you icons that you can replace, and it will add all of those icons to the head of your HTML, and yeah, it will basically do everything for you. And there should be a manifest file as well, but it's somehow missing now. I know where it went. And yeah, and if you want to configure your PWA, head to the documentation of the plugin, and it will tell you that in your view.config.js you can just add a field PWA and change stuff from the plugin. Now, yeah, if you want to see a real example, again, head to my Japanese phrasebook, which is a PWA that works offline, because when you're traveling you don't always have internet connection, so I wanted to make an application that you can install on your phone and that you can then use to get phrases. Yeah, check this out. There's also an example for push notifications if you want to try this. And in Chrome, since version 68, you have to do a bit of work to get the add to home screen to work. There are slides for this as well and an example. So yeah, basically you just have to wait for the event and then ask the prompt the user to accept it, and yeah, then there's also an event on when the user has agreed to this. There's even an example in the same repository as the JS13K games. So over here there's an add to home screen example, and this service worker is even smaller, but the index.js has this code in here, that before install prompt that you can use, so you can get the add to home screen prompt on new Chrome devices. Yeah, and all of this can also be tested with Lighthouse, which we've also talked about. You can test this with web page test. And yeah, then there are a few more links to resources. Again, the Google page on progressive web apps. There's also a good documentation at MDM. There's the Google Workbox plugin, which does a lot of the heavy lifting for you when you want to write service workers. It can build a service worker for you, pre-configured. This is very, how do you say, it's very opinionated, but you have to do less work. Then there's an article that I've written myself about setting up a Vue CLI project as a progressive web app. This also uses the Japanese phrasebook as an example. And the last link is a service worker cookbook, which has even more service worker examples. Great, now we're at the end, and I hope you now have a good understanding of what's a progressive web app.